Namaste and welcome to the JNMA podcast. Today we have a special episode focused on systematic review. We are joined by Dr. Rolina Dhital, an expert in research methodology. Dr. Rolina, thank you so much for being here with us today. Mm,
Hello and namaste. Thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast.
Azur. So, to start us off, could you please tell us what is the importance or significance of systematic review in the field of research?
Well, I think systematic review is not just important in the field of research, but it's also important in the field of, policy making as well as in practices, be it clinical practice or public health practice. Because systematic review helps us in generating evidence. So when we talk about evidence-based practice, we rely on the evidence that's derived from systematic review. So that's how so many like global practices that we are depending on, or so many global policies that we are depending on, are derived from systematic review. So it has a very important place, not just in the field of research, but as well as in practices and policies.
Mhm. So, moving on, could you please tell us what are the initial steps a researcher should take when starting a systematic review?
Well, like in any research, I think the most important thing is to have a very clear research question. And I think that's where most of the researchers struggle with. Most of the time, the researchers are in rush to, kind of finish things and get their work published, but they forget to spend a lot of time on, framing a proper research question.
Mm-mm.
So for systematic review, you must have a very clear idea on what are you, looking for. And when we
Mhm.
talk about research question in systematic review, it comprises of a framework where we need to have clarity about our population, our intervention or exposure, our comparator group, and outcomes. So you must have those clarity before you delve into systematic review. That would be the most important thing.
Mhm.
And the second most important thing is when we talk about systematic review, you need to have a very good team because systematic review is all about teamwork. So just one person can't do systematic review. So
Mhm.
make sure you have a good team and you have a good research question.
Oh, that's very insightful. So, speaking of the research team, how many team members are typically required to conduct a systematic review?
So when we talk about the team, the minimum requirement is you need to have at least two members. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not possible to conduct a systematic review if you are just one person. So
Mm-mm.
you need at least two people. So that would be your rule number one for systematic review.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, systematic review is all about, like analyzing, reviewing different literature and trying to, assess their quality as well as generating evidence. So if you have like more than two people, that would be even better because like you would have different opinions and multiple voices, and you can, settle down the disagreements, and, you can't rely on just one person for any decision. So it would be a combined decision making process. So I would say, I mean, there isn't any upper limit, but like five, six would be a good number. But you may have more as well. But make sure like everybody in your team is accountable and they do the work because systematic review is very rigorous. So as long as you have members who are actually doing the work, I mean, there isn't any kind of criteria for the maximum number, but the minimum is at least two.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So, moving on, what strategy can be used to conduct a comprehensive literature search for a systematic review?
Search strategy is in itself a crucial step in systematic review.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate goal of conducting a comprehensive search strategy is to ensure that you are not missing any evidence out there. When you have a research question,
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that any potential article or studies or reports out there are not being missed.
Mm,
So that should be the goal, that should be the aim. So depending on that aim, you need to build your search strategy.
mm,
And it's about combining the concepts. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a framework we use typically called PICOS. So you
mm,
need to combine the concepts, and it's a science of its own, it's a language of its own, and you need to, in order to not miss the studies out there, you have to look into different databases. So if you just rely on one database, it might
mm,
not capture all the publications out there. So make sure that you have at least 4 to 5 databases that you are looking for. And depending on your research question and the context that you are looking at,
mm,
you may also look into other sources such as websites, organizations, or references search. And let's say if you are like focusing on publications conducted in Nepal, then make sure you are also capturing the database where the articles in Nepal are stored, not necessarily that it's PubMed indexed, but make sure like you use a database such as NebJoL or NebPed.
mm,
Or if you are looking in some other countries, make sure you also include their national database. So we have to have a larger picture and to make sure that we aren't missing anything.
mm. That is a great tips. Now, in your opinion, what would be the average time required for a systematic review?
Systematic review is a time-consuming process. It's not easy. I mean, it's easy in terms of convenience, like you can do systematic review within the comfort of your home or your office.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, there are no shortcuts.
Mm,
So it's a very rigorous process. So even for like, performing search strategy, it might creating a proper search strategy, it might take you 2 to 3 days or even a week, and for screening even longer. So I would say if you're a full-time systematic reviewer, it might take you a minimum of 3 months if it's your full-time work and you are not doing anything else. But
mm-hmm.
for other working professionals, I think it might take 6 months to 1 year, so
Mm,
or longer. So
mm,
it's a time-consuming process. So many people think it because like you can sit at home and do it very quickly. People think like you know you can finish it in a short period of time, but that's not the case.
mm, mm-hmm. So, yeah, moving on, in your opinion, what are the possible barriers to conducting a good systematic review?
Well, I think the 2 points that I mentioned earlier, like not having a clear research question,
Mm,
like rushing to, finish things, trying to jump, not completing different steps of systematic review is one of the barriers to like complete your systematic review. Another is like not having a dedicated team. Like
mm,
if you are the only person who is dedicated and really, motivated to complete it, but if your team members aren't, then that's also another major barrier.
mm,
So I would say these two are the most important barriers. And when we talk about like research question, I think one of the most common pattern that I've noticed is like when we talk about PICO, a lot of people are not clear about their outcome, or
mm,
sometimes people try to have multiple questions.
mm,
I mean, they want to mix the ideas and they want to do this and that. So when you have like a very ambitious project in mind, it's less likely for you to finish it. But
mm,
if you have a simple, straightforward thing, then it's easier.
mm,
So, be it systematic review or any research, I think it's always easier when you have like few research questions
mm,
in mind and a simple, straightforward. So, if
mm,
you are like, over enthusiastic and,
mm,
not having clarity on those things, then that would actually be a barrier for you to complete your systematic review.
mm. Yeah. So, lastly, what do you think is the scope of systematic review for researchers in Nepal?
Well, I think systematic review, it's like an emerging field in Nepal.
Mm,
So personally, like I actually attended formal training on systematic review during my master's course in global health. It was back in 2010, 2011, like 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, I think back in here in Nepal, it wasn't so commonly discussed. Like many people were not even aware of the term, and a lot of people used to get confused between systematic review and general literature review and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
in recent years, there has been a shift, and I've noticed a major shift since COVID,
Mm-hmm.
like 2020, when there was lockdown and people had time and they wanted to utilize it, and that's when they became a little more aware of systematic review. So these days, lots of researchers, both young and senior ones, are equally interested in systematic review, and it's a very encouraging sign because systematic review enables you to take evidence-based decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of systematic review is that there is a step in systematic review where you need to critically also assess the papers. So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of improves your critical thinking, and it kind of helps you become a better researcher for your primary research as well. So I think as an emerging field, it's a hopeful scenario for Nepal and for the researchers here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rolina, for sharing your expertise with us today. This has been a very informative discussion. Mm. And that's a wrap for today's episode of JNMA Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.